On August 23, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty that contains secret protocols dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. The treaty gave Hitler the green light to invade Poland on September 1, 1939, sparking World War II in Europe. The Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east on September 17, 1939, and occupied parts of the country. In June 1940, Germany defeated France and occupied most of Western Europe. Hitler turned his attention to the Soviet Union, viewing it as a source of resources, territory, and a place to implement his ideological plan. Hitler planned the invasion of the Soviet Union, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, for June 1941. He amassed a force of over 3 million men, 600,000 motor vehicles, 750,000 horses, and 600,000 tons of supply. The German forces were divided into 3 army groups, North, Center, and South, which would strike at key objectives and capture territory in the Soviet Union. The invasion was preceded by a massive propaganda campaign that portrayed the Soviet Union as a barbaric and inferior country, and the German soldiers were indoctrinated with the belief that they were fighting a racial and ideological war against Jewish Bolshevism. Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941, with a massive surprise attack on Soviet positions along a 2,900 kilometers front. The German forces quickly achieved their initial objectives, capturing vast amounts of territory, destroying Soviet air and ground forces, and inflicting heavy casualties on the Soviet Union. German forces advanced quickly and easily, encountering little resistance from the unprepared and surprised Soviet troops. Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, played a crucial role in the surprise attack by launching a massive aerial assault that destroyed much of the Soviet Air Force on the ground. This allowed the Germans to achieve air superiority, which proved critical throughout the invasion. After advancing rapidly into Soviet territory, German forces encountered stiff resistance in the city of Smolensk, which was a key transportation hub for the Soviet Union. The battle for Smolensk lasted for over a month, from July 10 to August 10, 1941. Despite facing a determined Soviet defense, the Germans were eventually able to capture the city, which allowed them to continue their advance towards Moscow. The German army laid siege to the city of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, in September 1941, cutting off all supply routes and trapping the city's population. The siege lasted for 872 days, from September 1941 to January 1944, and resulted in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 million civilians due to starvation, disease, and bombing raids. Despite the harsh conditions, the city's defenders managed to hold out against the Germans, and the siege was eventually lifted by the Soviet Red Army. German forces launched a major offensive aimed at capturing the Soviet capital Moscow from October 1941 to January 1942, but encountered fierce resistance from the Soviet army and the harsh winter weather. The German offensive was eventually repulsed by the Soviet defenders, marking the first major defeat of the German army in the war and a turning point in the Eastern Front. The largest and bloodiest battle of World War II, the Battle of Stalingrad, which began in August 1942 and ended in February 1943. The German army launched a major offensive aimed at capturing the industrial city of Stalingrad, now known as Volgograd, but faced determined resistance from the Soviet Red Army and Soviet civilians. The battle raged on for months, with both sides suffering massive casualty. In the end, the Soviet Union emerged victorious, with the German army suffering over 800,000 casualties and losing much of its fighting capability in the east. The invasion of the Soviet Union was a turning point in World War II, and it ultimately led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. The war on the Eastern Front would continue for several more years, resulting in some of the deadliest and most brutal events of World War II. The invasion resulted in the deaths of millions of people, including soldiers and civilians, and the displacement of millions more. It also had a significant impact on the course of the war, tying up German resources and diverting attention away from other fronts. The Soviet Union emerged from the war as a superpower, and the invasion of the Soviet Union remains one of the most significant events of World War II.